Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Thank you for joining us today here in the lounge. Today, my guest is Maynard, and we are going to be talking about sparking curiosity through STEM, something that we're both very passionate about. And so today's quote to get us started is "Curiosity is more important than knowledge" by Albert Einstein. Now, Maynard is better known as the Hip Hop M.D., and he graduated from the University of Washington with a degree in civil engineering and is an award winning science communicator. Noticing the lack of minority involvement in STEM fields, he created Hip Hop Science with the goal of encouraging minorities and youth to pursue more advanced career paths. And I have seen Maynard in action, and he makes science really, really fun. So, Maynard, I'm really happy to have you here with me today.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we met at the New Worlds last year. We were together at Space Power. And so
Yeah.
it's been so fun to see you in different environments and different elements and see what you've created come to life. But I'd love to hear the origin story and what sparked this idea for you.
Yeah. It's funny, the origin story is always for me, it always changes in a way, right? Because
Yeah.
it's continuing to evolve even now as it is with this platform. And it's always a great chance for me to kind of reminisce about all the different things that I've done and how far I've come with this platform. But for me, at the heart of it all is curiosity, like we started off this session with. It all started with curiosity for me. I always had this innate curiosity in science. And for me, it was just the environment. I love being in nature. I love being immersed in wildlife. And since I was a kid, that was my very first introduction into science, was just being around nature, going to our local pond and catching frogs and salamanders and snakes. And that was just where I loved to be at, and I had a goal to be a wildlife biologist. That was my very first thing that I wanted to study when I eventually got into school. And so that's kind of what started off this trajectory. But for me, it always been about also following what you're passionate about doing. So outside of obviously doing science work, I was big into entertainment, worked as a music artist, worked as an entertainer, as an actor, and loved being in front of camera. And ever since I was a kid, you threw a camera on and that was like my time to shine, right? And that was another thing that always fueled me. And so I kind of had these two contrasting lanes, this kind of love for science and then also this love for entertainment. And growing up with a African family, African household, it was always school first, education, go to school and earn your degree and set yourself up for success. And so that was always my mindset. And so I got into college, eventually got into the engineering fields and graduated my degree in civil environmental engineering. And after I started working professionally for a few years, I finally realized, there's always that kind of transcending realization after you finish school, like, oh, I'm in the real world now. Like I can go out and do whatever I want to do. And so that was my time to really identify all the things that I kind of put on the back burner, and in my love for entertainment. And that whole other side of me was something that I just never had a chance to fully 100% pursue. And so I did a complete 180, left engineering, moved down to Los Angeles to pursue some entertainment opportunities and continued to thrive in that, and was loving kind of that new energy and that kind of newfound sensation and joy that it brought me. And everything kind of came full circle because I still wanted to give back. I've always been passionate about supporting the next generation. And so that's kind of how Hip Hop Science platform was born. It was me being able to put together my two loves, my love for science and my love for entertainment, merge them together as one only for me to be able to showcase my true self of all these different sides that were unique and authentic to me, but also to help inspire and spark curiosity in others, especially students of color, minority students, underrepresented students that didn't have the same opportunities, that came from backgrounds like me, that weren't really exposed to a lot of different, people in STEM and people in these different career paths. And so that's what I try to do now with my platform, is to spark curiosity in the next generation, showcase all the amazing places that career in the STEM fields can take you, and kind of bring that excitement and that joy and that love to science by utilizing my background in music and entertainment to help spark that curiosity in science. So that's what I do now. I work as a science communicator with my platform, and things are still growing and elevating in the work that I do, but it's been such a blessing for me to be able to share my love, my joy of science and entertainment with so many others, and hopefully, educate people on this journey as well.
I love that. Yeah, and It just also goes to show that no matter what you are doing, what you are pursuing in your life, because so many people think that we have to kind of separate these things and have silos of who we are, and that
Yeah.
is to blend them. And in that blending, it's often creating even more curiosity for people because it's the whole self coming to the table rather than just like a segment or a sliver.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so that, and I love being able to share that authenticism as well too, because I think that's something we forget as we, even as we're in college and pursuing higher education, and especially when we get into our career fields, sometimes we put one side of ourselves, to the back burner, and we lose it, and then we always kind of feel this hole inside of ourselves, right? Because we're not really going after what we love doing, or we're not fully involving or indulging ourselves into these other passions and these other creative pursuits sometimes. And so I always like to especially share that with the youth, that you can be multifaceted, that you can have interest in multiple different things. You can love to dance and love science. You can be into fashion and have a love for education as well too. You don't just have to be you don't have to be following just one particular lane. And so I think that's important even as adults for us to have that mindset that we can do multiple different things, and we can share these different passions with the world as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that question of what do you do just because, right? Not the thing that's getting you the degree or the thing that's going to help you get the promotion or to be more productive, but what do you do just because it lights you up and because
hmm
it just feels good? And I think a lot of adults lose that. We go through periods of just it's usually a slow crumbling, right? It goes away slowly.
Yeah.
It's not like this overnight thing where it's very stark contrast. So it's the frog in the boiling pot, and then all of a
hmm
sudden you wake up one day and you're like, wow, I don't do anything just because, if there's
Yeah.
not a reason attached to it, then I won't do it, right? Because
hmm
otherwise I'm wasting time. So
hmm
what are some of the other things that you do just because?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. And that ties in with the quote that I always live by, is when you find your passion, it becomes your purpose and you can no longer be passive. And so for me, that justifies a lot of the different things that I, pursue, because I try to be purposeful with different things. And it has to be things that live outside of just me, because if it's only just satisfying me too, then it doesn't serve kind of a greater purpose, which, especially for me doing my SciComm work, sparking curiosity and excitement. That's something that I'm really passionate about. But if the things outside of the things I just do because, like I said, I'm an avid explorer. I love to be, like I said, versed in nature. That's my happy place. You mentioned your backpacking trip, being able to get away and be off the grid for a while. Like, those opportunities are
Yeah.
always amazing to me. Being able to just be fully immersed in something brand new, be off the grid for a little while. I mentioned earlier I'm going on an expedition in a couple weeks to Panama, working with sea turtles, and that's always been a passion project of mine. And so that's the position I think that I'm most happy about doing this work now, is I've been able to open up all these other lanes that definitely tie into my science work, because obviously these are all kind of STEM related things, but I'm fully engulfed into this world of science and this joy for science that merges all sorts of different areas that I'm passionate about. And it's opened up these different lanes for me to do these things that I've always been curious about doing, but I never really knew if I could just do them because I wanted to do them, or if I needed to do things in order for like financial gain or all these other aspects. Like, now I can just go about and do whatever sparks curiosity in me. And there's always some science connection, because I always tell people there's science in everything. And so now it's like I get to do all
Yeah.
these cool creative things and tie them with my love of science as well too, because I can pull out the science and all these different elements. And so for me, it's anything that kind of sparks that curiosity and excitement in me is what I love doing.
I love that. Yeah, that science isn't everything. It really is. I like to say that our life is just one big giant science experiment. And
Yeah.
we're constantly testing new variables and then the environment's changing. And, it's so many people, I think we get hung up on, well, when we're trying something new, now it's going to be this way forever. But that's
hmm
not how it works. And so I like to say, just try it for a day, try it for a week, make it
hmm
really small. And then if you
hmm
decide you don't like it, right, you've tested all the variables against you, the control, then you can decide, okay, well, that is not the experiment that I want to continue running. Let's try something different.
hmm
And it's a refreshing approach to life.
Yes, yes. No, that's an amazing position to have is look at life as a big science experiment because yeah, we what's the quote that everybody's always searching? Everybody's trying to search for the meaning of life, right? And it's different for everybody, right? The meaning of life is completely different for every single
Oh, yeah.
individual on earth because your purposes are different, what you value is different, your emotional support, family ties, all these different things shape your perspective on life. And so being able to go at it with the position that this is one big science experiment, it lets you be able to make your hypothesis, right? Like think of what things could possibly happen. What directions could this possibly go? If you make it, like we always say in science, there's no such thing as failing when it comes to science, right? Because every single situation that doesn't work out teaches you something and it gives you new elements to be able to be like, okay, now let me kind of reconfigure things and try this approach and see what works. So you have the ability to test new things. And so that's one area of life I always kind of look at. I never think of anything that I do as a failure. It's just learning opportunities, just this opportunity to improve and get better. And so if you kind of go with that approach of no, there's no such thing as failing, then it lets you be a little bit more purposeful in the things that you go after and know that, hey, there's no limits to the things that I can be able to bring into my life and the position in the new places that I can go as well.
Yeah, I love that. There's an acronym I came across a while ago now, and it was FAIL, first attempt in learning. And
Yeah.
so you might have many of those, and then some people might argue, well, it's not my first attempt. It's that no, but it's your first attempt with that new thing. Maybe with that you introduce a new skill or a new tool, or you've learned something new, right? And so it's each step we take is an iteration upon the previous thing. And we're constantly changing and growing and evolving. I mean, the environment is constantly changing and evolving. And so it's just this constant kind of dance that we get to map out for ourselves. And it
Mhm.
gets to be more fun when we do it that way, rather than like
Mhm.
having this really rigid, it must look this way in order for it to be correct. But so many of us, we really want the like A and the gold star, like tell me I'm doing it right. So
Yeah.
what's your advice for students or people that you come across that might have that kind of mindset?
Yeah. And yeah, I think especially for students, we it's that, and that's not a natural mindset either. That's a learned
Good
behavior in
point.
a way, right? Because we talk about
Yeah.
curiosity, and that's the most innate thing in all of us. We're all born naturally curious. As kids, like you don't know a stove is hot unless you touch it, right? You'd have to go through those
Right.
experiences to know what to not do next time. And what happens, unfortunately, is we get jaded by life and life experiences. And it could be peers, it could be family members, it could be educational platforms, all these different vessels that tell you can't do this, or you're not good enough to do that, or if you do this, you'll fail, or there's nobody that looks like you that's doing this, or you don't have any support in this position, you're not going to be able to have any success in this. So all these different little, the people from all sorts of different places and all these different narratives start popping out in your life and start to change your mindset and really strip you of those natural curious instincts. And so for me, as when I talk to students of all ages, and especially for our youth, is one, we talk about, we mentioned failure, to know there's no such thing as failing, to go after things that you love doing. Whether if you love fashion, if you love dance, these things that bring you joy, do those things, right? Don't feel like, oh, I have to
Yeah.
limit myself, or I have to go in a direction that my parents are telling me, or everybody's around me in my communities are telling me to do this. If you love something, go after what you love doing. And that's going to reshape so many different things and really give you a true purpose in your life, because along the way, everything comes full circle. I always talk about kind of my position in the work that I do now. I had that love for biology and wanted to be a wildlife biologist. By the time I got into college, I started meeting peers, even educators were telling me, you don't want to go into wildlife biology. There's no opportunity for that. There's no way you're going to be successful in that. There's no money in that field. You need to do engineering. You need to do computer science. And that stuck with me, right? Because I wanted to be able to set my family up for success, myself up for success once I graduated. And so I ended up going to engineering, which was a shift for me. It wasn't what I was passionate about doing, but it still fell into my whole love for STEM. I was still interested in design and all these different things. And so I went into that field because I thought, okay, I can still be able to pull out these different elements that are unique to me, but it wasn't really at the core of what I wanted to do. But now full circle, doing this platform that I'm doing now, I get to go on wildlife expeditions. I've spent month
So
out at
cool.
sea. I do a lot of, wildlife content on my platform because that's innately what
Yeah.
I've always been curious about and love doing. And so you kind of have that full circle realization. Those opportunities always come back front and center. If you're truly passionate about them and truly love them, you'll find a way to have success. And so I always try to share that story with youth, especially to let them know that life is going to take you in so many different directions, but ultimately you're going to go where you're meant to be. And so I think that's really important for everybody, not just youth, everybody, to really have that mindset as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me more about this month at sea that you were doing that you just mentioned there. That sounds really awesome.
Yeah, I was part of a program called Ocean Exploration Trust. There's a huge research vessel. It's called the EV Nautilus Exploration Vessel Nautilus. It's been traveling abroad for 15 years now. I believe this is actually their 15th anniversary, but it's a research trip. They bring researchers from all across the world and they go on all sorts of different expeditions to learn more about the deep sea. So we have
That's
submersibles on
cool.
board, we have marine biologists on board,
Yeah.
and we do everything from collecting samples to deploying scientific instruments out at sea, to working with our ROVs, doing everything from mapping the sea floor to collecting specimens, collecting sediment samples, all sorts of different things. I got a chance 3 years ago now to go on my first expedition. I was doing some science communication work for the ship, and I went out again just this past year for another 10-day expedition. And that's for
Wow.
me has been one of the most transformative parts of my SciComm career, is being involved with
Yeah.
this organization, because not only do we do that cool research, we also get to share that with the world. So we have these ship to shore interactions where schools, students, organizations from across the globe can tune in to the sea, a live stream. And we talk to students, we share all these unique findings, different things that we've explored, different places that we've gone. We do all these different educational series. And so that's one thing that I was able to do with that ship, doing day-to-day ship to shore interactions, educating students across the globe. And then when we come back from our programs, we get to also do that in a deeper capacity. For me, it's through keynote presentations and being able to share my work with the masses. And so I've shared my expedition story in keynote presentations to schools, to colleges, and different educational platforms across the country as well. And so, yeah, it was an amazing experience, learned a lot from it. And it also sparked my scuba training. They sponsored my scuba
Oh,
training,
amazing.
got scuba certified after that trip. And I've always been an ocean lover. And so it's been able to immerse me into the deep sea like I never thought. It's been amazing.
Yeah, scuba diving is such a special thing, and I love going diving because it's just you and this, like, silence, right? And you really
Mm,
become aware of your breath and
yeah.
how your breath impacts
Mhm,
your buoyancy and just everything that how it affects your environment, and it's really special,
mhm.
to be there with these different creatures under the water and just be in such an environment and the opposite of a fish out of water, right? Not in our natural habitat, and so
Yeah.
just with that is there's a high level of risk, and there's a lot of intentionality that has to go with those types of excursions. um,
Yeah.
but that's
It's
so
it's
great.
a it's a humbling it's a humbling experience being at scuba diving, being out at sea. And there's so many connections that we can make to the deep sea and deep space. And being at scuba
Mm,
diving for me is probably
absolutely.
the closest that I would say, closest I've probably gotten to being an astronaut, because you think about, just like you mentioned, the complete silence, just being immersed in this huge, crazy atmosphere. For space would be the universe. For you at deep sea, it's just this amazing vast ocean of blue or darkness all around you, right? And you realize how
Yeah.
small and minuscule you are in that very moment. But it's a way to be able to fully be in tune with yourself. Like you mentioned, know your breathing, know how, like, the different changes that you make in your own body, how that dictates your relation with your environment around you. There's so many amazing just life learning lessons that you get from scuba diving that are pretty fascinating.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I agree, and that's one of the reasons why, it's part of the requirements for being an astronaut, right? Going scuba
Yeah.
diving, getting your pilot's license is, just mastering those different environments and understanding, especially in a space where it's like omnidirectional, right?
Hmm.
Where are we gonna go and how are we gonna get there, and what does that zero gravity feel like?
Hmm.
What goes wrong? Like, when you have to I've done rescue diver certification, and that was really awesome to go through because it's now that you understand what could go wrong and how to handle those things, it gives you a sense of calm
Yeah.
because you know that you'll be able to handle those situations, or
Mhm.
at least have a better idea of what needs to be done than if you were just, on your first dive ever, right? And then
Yeah.
something were to happen.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, that's
that's
amazing.
awesome.
So yeah,
I
I'm
just
excited to do some diving on my upcoming trip. So we'll be doing
Yeah,
a
with
lot of
the
snorkeling
turtles,
and some
right?
diving with this trip, and some nice tropical water too. So I won't have to be full wetsuited up. So
Yeah, but just definitely diving in the warmer water is more pleasant than diving in the
yeah.
colder water. Have you ever done any cave diving? That's one thing that I would like
I
to
have
get
not
do
yet.
more of
I
the
have not
technical
yet.
kind of cave
Yes, yes. Coming up,
diving.
yes.
Yeah.
I would like. I would
There's
need to. I need to advance my certification to do some of the cave
Yeah.
diving. But yes, that's definitely on my list to do for sure. Mhm.
Yeah, I love doing wreck dives also, going to
Ooh.
explore. Speaking of curiosity, you see there's this thing under the water and it's like people were on this and there were letters or lives and tools and there's a
Mhm.
whole story that goes with that and has
Yeah.
been there for 50 years or 100 years or whatever it might be. And
Mm-hmm.
so to really kind of ponder those things is
Mm-hmm.
is really quite interesting. And our brains are fascinating, right? We humans are
Yeah.
meaning-making machines will come up with all sorts of stories,
Mm-hmm.
and whether or not those are true doesn't matter. It's just that being in that experience of like that
Mm-hmm.
wonder,
Yeah.
right? It allows our brains, I feel, to exist in a different space. It's a more liminal space, but then we can bring those experiences back where we can wonder more rather than be like, no, that's not how it works. No, it's
Mm-hmm.
only this way, or here's the checklist, just follow that.
Yeah.
And allowing for that sense of wonder is what can, I think, help us plug back into more creative spaces.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. No, you hit it on the head, and I think that's where we think about curiosity that comes into play because you have to ask questions in order to even expose yourself to these opportunities, right? Like if
Yeah,
if you never put yourself in a position to kind of step outside the box or step outside of your comfort zone, you
right.
wouldn't be immersed into opportunities to fly, be a pilot, to get a scuba license, to be immersed in deep sea, to go out in nature, right? You have to kind of be in a position to be able to ask questions and be uncomfortable in a way, and so it opens yourself up to so many different ways of thinking, and there's always
Wow.
this philosophical connection. I think we've even just in our conversation so far, like you see how many philosophical connections, whether it's not considering anything failing or sparking curiosity or kind of changing the narrative
Yeah.
about yourself, different philosophical connections that you can make to science and just life experiences in general, that to me that I'm always still learning about, and I think it's really really important for especially youth to know as they're kind of working through their next journeys as well.
Yeah, and also, and I like that you said their next journeys because so many times, when you're a kid, what happens? You think, oh, I'm going to graduate, I'm going to go to college, and then I'm going to graduate again, and then I'm going to have a job, and then like I've made it, like I'm
Hmm.
done. And it's not how it works. That's
Yeah.
that's just the first journey, right? And
Hmm.
there's going to be so many different pivots. I mean, you went to school for civil engineering, and while that is also a foundation for you and a framework for which you look at the world, it is not the thing that you're actually doing day to day.
Hmm.
And that's okay. All of the inputs that we have are going to help inform us, but we're going to constantly be iterating
Hmm.
and shifting and navigating. There's an analogy I like to use in aviation when you hand fly, they just have you have two fingers on the yoke. You're not like,
Hmm.
you know, Formula One
Yeah.
race car driving here.
Yeah.
It's just very gentle, very little movements to course
Hmm.
correct, so you stay on this path.
Yeah.
And I think when you're on autopilot, you're not paying attention to do that, right? So you catch the off course corrections like later when you're already
Hmm.
off track for quite some time. And so,
Hmm.
how do we bring that awareness back? And that oftentimes is through inviting curiosity, play, having fun, right? When's the last time you just danced because a cool song came on, or were you like, no, I got to
Yeah.
get this email out? Take, take a few minutes to yourself to,
Hmm.
look out the window,
Yeah.
notice that,
Just be in the
hey, the
moment.
sun's out. That's nice. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I got this new jewelry. It's not it was a watch. It's a
Oh,
watch face
okay.
that was turned into
Yeah.
jewelry, and it's like you see the inner clock workings on it.
Yeah.
And I had met someone who his had two of them on there.
Oh,
And I
wow.
was like,
Okay.
oh, that's really cool because I love antique watches. I love seeing like the internal workings.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I love it too because whenever anybody asks me what the time is, I can point to my wrist and say now. I was like,
Mm.
ooh, I like that.
That's
So
that is a good one. That's a good
yeah,
one.
I was like, well, I need this person's info. Do they have any left? And he's like, yeah. And so really cool story behind it. And
Mhm.
then I go on this backpacking trip and Loretta invited us to take off our watches so that we
Mm.
did not know what time it was. And you really had to be in tune with like, where's the sun in the sky and when is sunset and,
Mm.
all of that kind of stuff. And then when I
Yeah.
got home, this was waiting for me. So I was like, okay, that's
Mm.
perfect.
Yeah.
Now I can be more in the moment. And you know what the interesting thing is? I've
Mm.
been like just on time for everything. Earlier today, I
Yeah.
was looking and I was like, oh, I should probably check the time because, May and I are going to get started soon. And I was
Mhm.
like, oh, I still have 5 minutes before we meet. Great.
Yeah.
And it's like my internal clock has been turning back on to alert me to things rather
Mhm.
than me like abdicating it to a device.
Yep.
And that's been really cool to experience.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. You think about that detachment is so important, and that we talk about being detached when we go out somewhere, especially if you're like, a remote island or if you're in a
Yeah.
remote destination and you said taking off your watch, you leaving your phone at home, all these different things. It brings you back to these natural elements that are all innate in us as humans, right? And
Yeah.
we all have biological clocks within us, right? But what happens is, we're in the digital format. And so we rely on these digital tools, which are great, right? They let us be able to do
Yeah.
this live stream that we're on right now to be able to project,
Right.
this conversation to the masses and everything. But there becomes this connection to them that's become so profound and becomes so strong and intense that overpowers all these kind of natural instinctive things that we have, right? And we start to rely on these digital tools and forget that, we are already balanced internally with ourselves, and we're already balanced with nature and all these other elements. And so sometimes
Yeah.
it's good to have that break just to remind yourself that, hey, I am already one with nature and I can do these different things. And so I think it's good for us to take those moments, every so often to just remove ourselves, remember that we're fully, truly connected. And it gives us that kind of, ability to refresh and take a breath and be able to come back fully recharged. And we forget about that a lot of times. We forget about the vacations and the getaways and the moments with family and interpersonal connections because we're so caught up in this, this rat race sometimes. And for me, I try to take those moments to be able to get away. And for me, being able to be immersed in nature, even if it's just for an hour, a couple hours, a day, to be able to just do that, just to have that small reminder that this is our true connection. So that's important. I love that aspect. The time is now. Time is now.
Yes. Yeah.
Even
And
if I got a regular watch on, I'm still gonna say the time. It looks like the time is now.
yeah, that's great. And and it's just a little reframe, right? And just like
Mhm.
how you reframe what being a scientist is and what that means,
Mhm.
and how, most people when you say scientist, what do they think? They think like Dexter's laboratory with the white coat and the like beakers and all this stuff. And while that's
Yeah.
part of it, you're still a scientist when you're out in nature, right? You're a scientist in your kitchen.
Mhm.
Cooking is, baking is a science,
Yeah.
particularly, right?
Absolutely.
And there's so many different forms that this can take. And so I love what you're doing to help bridge that gap to make it more not just accessible, but also interesting
Mhm.
to the youth and to other people. Because if you're not exposed to something for one, you won't know that it's a possibility.
Yeah.
We can't really always make those leaps. And or if you only have this one idea of it, like, oh, I'm going to be in a lab with beakers, and okay, I don't want to be a scientist. And now
Mm.
you've cut out like so many different things of what that could entail and how you could bring something that does light you up, that is exciting and interesting to the table, and do
Mhm.
some really great, meaningful work.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that's how we push the edges of discovery, whether it's in
Mhm.
space or just as what you mentioned, the scientific frontier. So tell me a little
Yeah.
bit more about that. What does that mean to you, and how do people get involved in that if they're interested?
Yeah. No, I think that aspect is important. And I've had this talk a little bit with a lot of people within the space community. And I think space is an interesting community or just an interesting framework to have that dialogue, because, you know, I grew up thinking that, oh, the only thing that you can do in terms of having a career related to space was being an astronaut, right? Like we
Yeah.
grow up and it's like, oh, what do you want to be? I want to be an astronaut. Like astronauts go to space, and that's what space is about. And I think that mindset had been shared by so many people for such a long time, especially in our generation. And I think even right now, it's so important to know that space is much more than being an astronaut. You don't have to go out and explore deep space in order to be able to share a love for space exploration. There's so many different job opportunities within the between the aerospace fields, and we talk about it a lot in a lot of these different programs that I do. You know, everybody from engineers that are obviously doing rocket science work, but you know, you have biologists that do work related to space. You have other engineers that do work related to space. You have mathematicians that do work related to space. You have people that are in physical fitness that do work in relation to space, right? There's so many different career connections that you can make that also support space exploration and space travel. Material science engineers, people that are coming up with astronaut suits, you know. So I've known people that are in the fashion fields that have somehow, you know, managed to have a career in space exploration because they know interesting designs and they can be able to tailor and work with the new companies that are creating these new suits for astronauts to wear, right? And so you have all these different legs and these different tentacles that are all connected to aerospace, but are in fields that maybe have a more deeper connection for some people, because somebody might not want to be an astronaut, but they still love space, and they may want to find a way to be able to get into that field. There's so many different opportunities to be able to tie your passions and the things that you love with this greater, more vast opportunity, which would be aerospace. And so, and that translates to so many other fields as well too. And so it's really trying to find these interesting connections. And so even with the Hip Hop Science platform, the merger of music, entertainment, and science for me is just that, being able to show these kind of intrinsic connections that we're able to make to so many different areas, and really be able to challenge yourself to find these scientific connections to things that you wouldn't normally think are science related. You know, I had an interview recently with a team at Red Bull, and I was interviewing breakdancers that are going to be entering the Olympics, because breakdancing is going to be an Olympic sport for the first time this year, which is pretty crazy.
That's so cool.
Yep. So you're gonna have B-boys and B-girls in the Olympics this year.
Nice.
And we had a whole science discussion about the physics in different breakdancing moves, you know, and it was really awesome to kind of just hear their scientific thoughts of what kind of science went into their favorite moves and their favorite displays. And so you're able to make these really cool connections. And even with sports in general, you're able to make, you know, interesting physics connections and ties to sports analogies as well too. And I think that's really important, you know, being able to have that merger, because we really find that there's science in everything, and you can be able to make that connection to something that you care about and something that has meaning to you and still has an educational perspective as well. And so for me, it's really being able to find those unique connections and tie those into an outlet that means something to you. And I think the more and more we can make those connections in different fields, it really kind of sets a stage of inspiration and opens up these new doors of curiosity and understanding of all these different places that a love for science can take you.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you drew all those lines there, because it really is so layered, right? And it's like this feedback loop, because what we're doing when we're creating a spacesuit, or we're looking at a new rocket design, or we're looking at food and like growable solutions, how do we build in another environment, all of those things. Ultimately, in that exploration, we're going to learn also how we can do it better here on Earth. And that's another thing that a lot of people don't recognize or even know, is just how much our devices, you know, these things, baby formula, diapers, like all of these things that we use day to day and don't give a second thought to, exist because of our applications to the space environment. And in that, and like, how do we use it? And then, oh, well, this has applications on Earth also. And so it's not a either or, it's a yes and conversation.
Yep. 100%. No, that's important. And a lot of times what's like the, you know, especially when it comes to space, there's always been that narrative of, oh, we have so many different problems here on Earth. Why are we spending all this money exploring space and sending astronauts and spending millions of dollars on rocket technology? And it's because that simple fact that you brought up. So many different things that we have here on Earth come because of our desire and our curiosity for what's in the beyond and what's in our universe, you know. And so we've been able to develop so much unique technology that supports so many things that we're able to do here on Earth because of the fact that we've, you know, had a desire to travel into deep space. And so there's a connection, there's a tie and link in between both. And even exploring the oceans, the things that we learn about the oceans help us learn more about outer space, things that we learn about wildlife and how biological systems change and evolve here on Earth helps us better explore distant planets as well too. And so back and forth, there's a unique connection between both. And I think having that understanding, that mindset that, you know, we're not separate from our universe. Everything that happens here on Earth, here on land, is directly tied and linked to everything that's happening in our solar system and beyond, because we are part of that solar system. We are one and the same. And so the innovations that we're going to make here help support the universe, and the innovations that we're going to make in the universe and space exploration support us right back here on Earth as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. We are of nature. We are a part of it, you know, and biomimicry. Have you heard of biomimicry?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So for those of you who may not have heard this term, it is the imitation of models, systems, and elements of nature for the purpose of solving complex human problems. I mean, you look at, like every time I look at the inside of an engine of an aircraft, you know, and the spiral, I just see Fibonacci spiral, right? You see that in flowers. And we have all of these bionics, right? That's where the word derived from, is because we're creating, you know, this artificial arm or limb for somebody, but it's coming from, you know, us, we're nature. And how does this work within the system, and how can it work? How can the hand grasp and do the things like a natural hand can, right? So it's really fascinating to turn to nature to solve these problems, especially with, like you mentioned, going down below deep, because probably the aliens we're going to meet are going to look more like creatures under there in a very harsh environment where it's dark, there's a lot of pressure, you know, so many different factors. And it's just fascinating to kind of expand the mind thinking about those things.
Yep, 100%. Because that's how we evolved here. We evolved here on Earth from the oceans, you know, from possibly hydrothermal vents at the deep sea, you know. And so having that understanding, that's setting us up to be able to do the work that we'll eventually be doing on Europa, you know, as we try to look for ocean life and underneath the icy crust of Europa. And so there's so many different unique connections, and I think that tie-in is so fascinating because it reminds us of kind of these humble beginnings and how far we've come and how far other places have gone, and what that gap there's so much to learn within that gap of hundreds and billions of years of evolution and change that are so dynamic. And so that's an important thought process to always have as we're doing these different science explorations.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, you know, it's also because sometimes it's like these are paradigm shifts as we do science, as we get new information. I mean, in the 70s, people thought the brain was fixed and it was that, and that's all you had. And, you know, that's all you got. But now we know it's plastic, and we can change it, and we can like create new neural pathways. And so we're always going to be getting new information and new data. And so it's, you know, how do we create for ourselves as individuals who want to push the boundaries of the scientific frontier, the stability and safety within which we know like this to be true, and we're open to something else coming in, because I think that's another kind of roadblock, is that we then want to cling to this like version when, you know, new information is coming in. We're like, no, that doesn't fit my model, so it's wrong. Right. And that's how most of us view reality. It's like, no, this is how I want the world to be, so I'm going to try to force everything around it to fit that. But that can be very exhausting, and it's certainly not sustainable. But we can turn it around and have a very exciting conversation instead, and know that things are always changing.
Yep. Flipping that perspective is important. You brought something interesting as far as just historically these different narratives and different things that we knew of science at one time that through new innovations we've been able to find is wrong. And you brought up the brain, and there was, you know, early on there was a whole belief of kind of left brain, right brain narrative that, left brain thinkers are more, logical, having kind of intrinsic thinking, critical thinking skills, and right brain thinkers are more creative and
Yeah.
artistic. And that's been debunked for generations now, but we still kind of have that mindset of like, oh, I'm not
We
a
still talk
creative
about it.
thinker. I'm more
Yeah.
logical thinking, and vice versa. And it's a limiting mindset. We know now that both sides of the brain are equally work equally when it comes to all these different elements. And so we've kind of shaped this narrative that maybe scientists are more logical thinkers, and then like artists and people that like to draw, are more of these kind of more musically inclined, or these more creative thinkers. But I always tell people like science is one of the most creative fields you could possibly
Yeah.
imagine. These innovations that we're able to come up with, these new technologies, from everything that's as profound as space exploration to understanding biomimicry and being able to reshape tools and things that we have here on Earth to be that are mimicked after nature, things in nature. Like, these are creative skills. This takes creativity. This takes asking questions. This takes being able to think outside the box, to be able to try something new. And so I always tell that, especially with students, that science is a creative field. You're a creative thinker. If you love music, we love art. Those are the people that are needed in these scientific fields, because we need that type of brain power. We need that type of thinking, because it reshapes all these different things that we do in the world of science. And so science is pure creativity. For anybody that's out there that doesn't think that they can be a scientist, science takes pure creativity. Absolutely.
I love that. I'm going to write that in there. Yeah, no, and also the thing is, I love that you highlighted that, because there the books, people like books that come out, and whatever bestseller, they're still talking about the traditional frame of left brain, right brain. And obviously
Yeah.
the scientists are now giving new language around that, but it's going to take a while for society to catch up, because that's just been the narrative. I mean, were you ever told as a kid that you had to wait like 30 minutes after eating before you could swim?
Yeah. Yep.
That is false.
Mhm.
There's nothing. I just read this morning too. It was one of the little headlines in my morning brew email, that the science has debunked this. You do not have to wait 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And yet, like, every millennial child was told
Mhm.
that,
Yep.
because I don't know. Who
Mhm.
knows where that came
Mhm.
from?
Yeah.
Maybe at the time there was a thought that, I don't, you're heavier, so you might, I don't know, who knows?
Mhm.
But
Yeah. That's why
it's
that
like this
show, I don't know if you
fake
remember,
news.
the show Mythbusters? That
Yes.
was
Oh,
on,
Mythbusters
like,
is great.
Mythbusters was such an amazing show, because it not only was it, pure science based, but you had all these different creative elements, because you were able to go out and actually perform and conduct these experiments to see what worked and what didn't, and be able to debunk things. But it helped kind of change this kind of narrative, this mindset of these common, could be household things, it could be just
Yeah.
common day-to-day things that we always thought about, the swimming thing, eating pop rocks, like all these different things that, oh, if you eat too many pop rocks, your stomach is gonna explode, right? These things that we just took as
Yeah.
scientific fact, because we were just told that in kind of this popular culture. And it broke those down in interesting ways, to be able to realize, oh, this is the science behind it. This is why this doesn't work, or this is why this does work.
Yeah.
And there's so many things that we just take for granted, or that we just take as is, because we've been told it for so long, that it just kind of instinctively just stays in our mindset. And we need to get in a better position where we're more scientifically literate, so that we can
Yes.
know how to ask the proper questions to debunk some of these methodologies or some of these ideologies that have just been innate in us for so long.
Absolutely. I mean, oh, you mean that not everything I read on the internet is true?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. That show is so great. And I also used to love Alton Brown on the Food Network channel. I don't
Oh,
know if you'd ever come
yeah.
across
Yeah,
his
I remember
show,
Alton Brown. Yep.
but
Mhm.
yeah, so he would basically, in his cooking, also he would tell you, okay, this is how you bake the thing. This is what setting you set the
Mhm.
oven to. This is how you do whatever. But he
Yeah.
would explain then what happens when you don't, right?
Yeah.
And like why, and like from a scientific perspective, what's
Mhm.
going on in the breakdown of molecules, and why I remember very clearly him talking about like making a cake and, like
Mm.
folding the batter, right?
Yeah.
And that there would be some air bubbles and he'd be like, walk away, just walk away. There's lumps and bubbles, just leave it. Because
Yeah.
the more you stir it, the more gluten you create, which is what creates that heaviness and that density that you may not want.
Mhm.
And it everything stuck with me. I mean, this was like 20 years ago I watched the show, and I can
Yeah.
still like recall scenes like I just watched them right now
Yeah.
because it actually made sense. And he went
Mhm.
that why, right? I think humans, we have this craving, this need to know why,
Mhm.
but we've been fed this junk food for so long that we're not going deeper into the why because
Yeah.
we're too distracted with the high dopamine of like the distraction or the high
Mhm.
sugar, salt, fat
Yeah.
combos that we get
Yeah.
in our news and everything like that. So,
Yeah.
what is your
That's why it's so important. That's why it's so important to do this work for youth, especially because you brought up that, right? You heard that fact 20, 30 years ago, whatever it may be, but it stuck with you. It stuck with you because it hit a chord, it hit this innate curiosity that you had, right? That
yeah,
stuck with you. And think about all these different learning lessons that you can be able to support youth with, these different facts, these different mindsets that if you instill that in an early age, that's going to be transcendent. It's going to stick with them for so long, and then they're going to grow up 20, 30 years from now understanding, oh, this is why this takes place. This is why this is important. This is why this has an impact on so many other things. And then they can in turn educate others that they're able to share that information with. And so it's really important to hit that at such an
yeah,
early age because it's a curiosity that made that fact stick within you. It was that wanting to know the answer, wanting to know the why. And if you're able to target that at an early age, that memory is going to stick with them for so long.
oh, absolutely. So, what would your advice be for parents or other educators out there who want to encourage, their audiences? Because obviously, it's when we're all doing the thing that is change, then we become this huge force, right? And it's like the drop in the ocean becomes a tsunami.
Mhm.
So what has really worked, with the students you've come across? What do you see? Obviously tapping into the curiosity, and that's going to be different for every child, different like environments. But what are some of the things that people watching that might have young children at home, or people that they work with, that they have the ability to have these conversations about? What are some of the small things we can do to get started here?
Yeah. I always say, especially for educators and for parents, I'm big on hands-on learning and hands-on
Mhm.
education. And it may seem
Yeah.
like a simple concept, like, oh, yeah, we get hands-on, touch things, but it's a little bit more deeper than we really give it credence to. In a lot of the engagements that I do with students, especially in working with educators, being able to be fully immersed in things that we have, so just everything from robotics to being out in nature, to be able to code. There's so many new things that are in new kind of platforms that are being implemented now that give students a greater and deeper connection with science that we've never had before, that we've never had those tools before. And I think it's an important aspect to remember because sometimes, and I grew up in the generation of standardized testing and, quizzes and exams. And I was never a good test taker. Like I did at school and I did good because I was able to memorize things quickly, but like standardized testing and that kind of old framework of you just got to school and quiz and make people memorize things, like that form of learning it's been disproven for so long. And
Yeah.
there's so many
You're just
amazing
learning to
tools.
pass a test. That's
Yeah,
all you're
you're
doing.
just learning to pass tests and it doesn't stick with you. It doesn't provide any deeper insight or deeper wisdom or different compelling storytelling or raise new curious ways of thinking that can now unfold into other different layers. And being able to bring hands-on opportunities to students is so profound. And sometimes some people come from backgrounds and schools that they may have had access to those different things. But I think this is where representation and discussions about equity and all these different things come into play.
Yeah.
Because I came from a background where we didn't have equitable access to different resources. And I do a lot of work now with like Title I schools and different schools in inner cities
Mm.
and all sorts of different places that don't have STEM labs, that don't have STEM activities, that don't have reading resources for students, that don't have opportunities to go out to museums and science centers and talk with scientists or talk with real life people that are doing that work, or bring people into their classroom that are doing unique work in different fields to be able to present the work that they're doing. And so sometimes if you come from privileged backgrounds, you might forget that those resources and access isn't open to others. But it starts really being able to find those hands-on opportunities, being able to see representation in people that look like you, that are doing work in different fields, sparks more curiosity and also sparks interesting thinking of the what ifs, like, oh, what could I possibly do? Or this is someone that looks like me that's doing amazing work in this area. And that's so transcendent as well, too, to be able to bring those inspirational figures to a classroom. And so I think for educators and parents, that's an important mindset to remember, is to understand how those different tools affect the learning for students, be able to provide more hands-on access, be able to provide more resources, and know that representation is key in everything, and that it could be such a supportive platform for your students to be able to not only change their curious ways of thinking, but also inspire them to do things that are greater.
Absolutely. And you know what you said there about when you don't see that someone like you is doing something, then it shuts the door in a different way. And I remember there's an Instagram and LinkedIn account now called Misrepresentation. And they make these little videos of, one that really stuck with me was a video of like all these 5-year-old girls saying what they wanted to be when they grew up. And it was like big things like president or, a pilot or an engineer or whatever it was that they wanted to be. But then as they got older, they started going into more narrow bands of what they said, because that's what they saw. That's where they saw other women. So then it's like that just, from coming from an aviation background, I was lucky that I got taken to air shows as a kid because I liked airplanes, and my mom then took me to the museums and took me to air shows. And so I got that exposure. But I mean, I've had my friend, she's a Thunderbird pilot. She was a Thunderbird pilot. And she said families would come up to her, after the Thunderbird show and like shove the little boy in front of her to talk about being a pilot. And then she'd talk to the little girl, say, oh, do you want to be a pilot too? And they'd be like, oh, no, she won't do that. And it's like, yeah, she can if she wants to, So it's remembering that what we do as leaders, what we do as parents or any authority figure to a child, right? If you're a teacher, if you're a big brother, big sister, if you've got siblings, like your word can be very powerful, and it might be an offhand comment to you or something you're not aware of, but it can really change the whole course of somebody's line of thinking.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's an area of my platform that I always share. I always talk about representation is key in so many different areas. It could be in gender representation. It could be in race relations and having minority representation in different platforms. Like seeing is believing. You truly, if you see something, you know that it's possible. You know that there's somebody out there that looks like you that was able to accomplish it. And the earlier that we're able to bring that representation to students, then it opens up that greater door for curious learning and curious thinking, because now they know, okay, there's no limitations to what somebody that looks like me, what somebody came from my background, somebody that came from my, educational status or from my disability that could actually, change their life for the better. And so that representation is so important. And that's a mindset that I think all of us, not only just like obviously creative content work that I do is important, but in for companies and for institutions and for colleges, being able to reach back and be able to provide that same equitable access and to be able to send representative figures back to be able to support the youth and be able to support students that are trying to elevate is so important. It's a full circle thing that takes all parts, all working parts. And we talk about this in every field, aerospace and engineering and biology and wildlife, like me wanting to be a wildlife biologist, that also, when I had educators and peers telling me not to go into wildlife biology, that there were no opportunities in that. It wasn't just because of the financial aspect. It was also because of the representation aspect. There weren't figures that looked like me. There weren't other Black biologists that they could point to and say, oh, that's someone that's having success that looks like you. And so when you have that limited mindset because there's no representation, then you start to believe that it isn't for you or that you can't have success in that field. So being able to find those representative figures and being able to have that full circle moment where you can be able to bring that representation back and uplift others, then it starts being able to open up this new workforce, this new opportunities for students that once before never even knew that that was a possibility. And so representation is absolutely key.
Yeah, absolutely. And just having open dialogue and having conversations. I mean, I remember when I was still in the corporate, world, I would have never had a hairstyle like this, right? Or I
Mm-hmm.
would have, because I had a Viking shave on one side and then like long hair for first,
Mm-hmm.
and then I cut it.
Yeah.
But by you doing these things, by you creating the Hip Hop Science Show, you're giving permission also to,
Mm-hmm.
hey, you can do something different. You don't have to look exactly like everybody else or be like everybody else. You can redefine what a scientist means, what
Mm-hmm.
a rap artist means, what a creative means. And, in doing that, that's going to continue to spark more and more curiosity, more and more wonder. And that's how
Yeah.
we get these innovations. Because very often these innovations are happening because people completely outside the realm of that field come
Mm-hmm.
in and they go, "Oh, what about this, this, and this?" And
Yeah.
they just put the puzzle pieces in a new order, and all of a sudden it's like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm watching right now, it's on HBO. I think it's like Wild Wild Space, I think is the
Okay.
name of it.
All right.
It's a new documentary that's come out, but for anyone who is in the space industry following, um, uh, what's the one in New Zealand with the rocket lab?
Oh,
Is that the one in New Zealand?
wait, is it a center? It's not a space center.
No, yeah, I think anyways, the company that came out of New Zealand, like, this guy didn't have a engineering degree and, didn't go to university, but he created a rocket company.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really fascinating to go through, like, the history of this
Mm-hmm.
space race, but in general, when you go through any kind of major innovations, people are coming in, like Leonardo da Vinci, he was
Mm-hmm.
not just one thing. He was an artist and he was, a scientist and he was in technology and he just like he was so multifaceted. And
Yeah.
someone earlier commented, how we should really be training people more broadly across a few different majors so that we can like get that line of thinking. And it would be really great to be able to have at least a course or a class that allows you to touch different things. And in some schools they have it. I remember in my 8th grade, we had like a science lab, if you will, and we had maybe 8 modules and we'd rotate through. And I remember taking the balsa wood and you built a bridge and you
Yeah.
test the pressure of like whose bridge could take the most pressure.
Mm-hmm.
We built rockets, we used CAD. We fixed drywall and did
Yeah.
plumbing. Like we did all these different hands-on things. And again, I remember those because it was hands-on and it was experiential. And it
Mm-hmm.
was like taking this knowledge and making it real rather
Yeah.
than it just being kind of like over here, which is what a lot of philosophy and math and all these things for people tends to stay over here. It doesn't really become real because they don't see how it's being applied.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's 100% true, and that ties back into we talked earlier about being multifaceted and having different skill sets that can translate into different areas. If you love fashion, you could also have a love for education. You could find ways to be able to tie those into space exploration and so many different things. It's really that same mindset of being able to know these different creative skills, these different creative abilities that you have can be linked to so many different things, and you don't have to limit yourself to just being in one lane or limit
Yeah.
yourself to only being one type of person. If you have something that you're passionate about, you love doing, you can find these unique connections to different aspects. And so it's always fascinating how everything always ties full circle in, and the
It
more and
does.
more we discuss about that and have these kind of open conversations around that, like I think people realize that, and then you start to manifest these things that you truly want in life. And it just starts by having that thought and just being curious about something.
Yeah, and not and then also by like naming and claiming that thought.
Mhm.
I came out of the wilderness, right? And we were talking before we went live where I was like, why am I
Mhm.
in this box? I want to be outside. I'm in this expensive, comfy bed, but I want to be in my sleeping bag under the
Mhm.
stars. Um, and it shows just how quickly we can adapt. So when the pivots do come, but this quote that you said earlier about once you find your purpose, you can't be passive.
Mhm.
And,
Yeah.
I've been contemplating this because I have said for so long that I would love to do like survival school training where
Mm,
I like desert survival school or wilderness survival school, and just being in these different environments and learning how to do the things that are required. And then
mhm.
taking leaders into that and being able to help them apply. And you're living it, you're actually experiencing it. And it's
Yeah.
just been getting stronger and stronger. So then I have this expedition experience and I'm thinking about how I want to do this. And I tell somebody on the phone yesterday. And then I talk with a client who were designing something for January. And he's like, hey, you know what? Can we do it outside? Could we like go for a hike? And I
Yeah.
was like,
You're like, yeah,
yes, we
like,
absolutely
thank
can.
you.
But it's almost like by what you just said, when you speak it out loud and you actually start to talk about it, it can
Mhm.
gather energy and you kind of create this
Yeah.
orbit around it. And because you're lit up, other people go, hey, I want some of that too.
Mhm.
And you
Yep.
can create these opportunities for yourself.
Yeah. Oh, I'm a big believer in speaking things into existence, and that was something I had to learn over time. Like I'd always been hungry and gone after things I love doing, but it's a new level when you really start to talk about it and start to manifest it. And every time I
Yeah.
bring something up and I share it with others, and I'm very purposeful about sharing things with others, then you start to it's kind of that same mindset of like, you get a new car and then you start seeing all these cars that start looking like yours everywhere on the road. You're like, everybody has my car. It's like, because you're
Yes.
so hyper focused on that one thing, right? And it's shaping everything around you, and you're so visually attuned to it. And it's the same thing when you start speaking things to existence. Like the universe starts to bring people around you. You start to meet people in different circles, different places that you go that have that same, either belief or maybe affiliation to what you're trying to go after. And then it starts being like, oh, this is where I was intended to be. Like this is what my purpose was this whole time. And it just started with that simple trust in yourself and that belief in yourself and kind of
Yeah.
manifesting that support around you. Mhm.
Absolutely. I totally
Mhm.
agree.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to see where this goes. And
Yeah.
who knows, maybe we'll do some sort of wilderness expedition together.
I'll,
And
I'll keep you posted because I have a good friend of mine who actually does. I have two friends of mine. I don't know if you know Hazen Abdul. He's done stuff on like if you ever watch National Geographic.
ooh, cool.
He's that
Yeah.
guy that goes on crazy. He's like, I'm going to go across the Amazon, barefoot,
Nice.
and go from one destination to the other and be
Yeah.
immersed in different cultures along the way. He's a naturalist and wildlife biologist by
This sounds
trade,
perfect.
but he hosts these different kind of these nature experiences where he'll take different small groups out somewhere in the wilderness and they'll do kind of survival training, understanding how to live off the environment and different things like that. And then I actually have another friend who actually just invited me a couple days ago. See how we manifest things here?
Look at this. It's already happening.
Yeah, I have another friend of mine. He invited me, him and his friend. They do these kind of backpacking snow survival lessons, and they're going to be
Ooh.
in Sweden, I believe, in like I want to say it's like February of next year.
Mm.
And they've done it in the past where they'll learn, you'll live in igloos and stuff like that. It's like all like outdoor winter survival training of how to
Yeah.
kind of adapt and survive for a couple of days completely off grid and in snow, right? So
Yeah.
so if you are interested, I got plenty of resources I can share with you.
I'm interested. Yes, we could take that offline for sure. Because that is something that has just been getting like stronger and stronger. And then this trip really cemented that for me. So
Mhm.
here we are live in
Yeah.
action, demonstrating how you can merge these different aspects of yourselves into new things, and be a scientist of your own life. So thank you,
Yes.
Maynard,
Mhm.
for today. Before we sign off, though, I do have a couple questions for you that I like to ask all my guests.
Yeah.
And so the first question is, what do you think your superpowers are?
Ooh, my superpower. Uh, I think it comes down to the common word that we've used throughout this whole session, which is curiosity. For me, I
Mm,
think my superpower is sparking curiosity, and that's what I love doing because I've always been curious, and curiosity is the most innate thing that's been in me in every stage of my career, even when I've deviated and pivoted into different directions. Curiosity has been at the core of everything that I do, and it lives outside of me because the things that I'm
Mm.
curious about, I want to share with the world. I want to share with others. If I find something that's fascinating, or if I want to know why something works the way it does, like I dive into it and I dig into it, and I want to share that discovery with others. And so that's what I try to do on my platform, is spark curiosity. So whether that's sharing new scientific findings, whether that's sharing a new way of thinking, or a new research finding, or a new discovery, it could be a wildlife discovery, a space discovery, whatever it may be, like being able to show that curiosity, kind of how my mind is wired and how my mind thinks, to be able to spark that excitement in others, to be able to show, hey, this is where your own curiosity can take you. This is where asking questions can be able to open up new doors for you. And so if anything would be a superpower of mine, it would be sparking curiosity into others.
I love that. Yeah. And that's like, I got this image of like this match, right? And it's like you've helped them like light it, and it's like passing the baton to the next one. Yeah, that's really cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Amazing. All right. Now, when we go through life, we often are faced with a myriad of decisions, right? And we sometimes get stumped on what way we should go, because maybe our heart and mind are in conflict, or we're just like, it's so new and we're overwhelmed. We don't know what to do. And so there's very often people in our world that we'll go to. So I call this our personal board of directors.
Okay.
And this might be like, you might have a main board, and then different people for different experiences. But I'd love to know if you have anyone on your board, or whether or not there's somebody you actually know. It could just be a public figure that you really respect their mindset or ideology. And so you kind of like try that hat on for size to give you a worldview in which to filter your decision-making process. It could be a historical figure. It could even be an avatar, or like a character from a fiction movie or book or something like that. So I'd love to know, do you have kind of regular people that you check in with before you ultimately make your final decision, or are they different every time? I'd love to hear a little bit about that process.
Yeah. For me, it's honestly really different every time. I don't think there's one particular person or group that I go to, because like I said, right, my curiosity takes me in so many different different layers and so many different tentacles and so many different platforms, that I always try to seek different people that may have expertise in different areas for some of that kind of creative thing that I do. But for me, like when you thought about, when you proposed the question of like who would be on my board of directors, my mindset initially went to kind of a more holistic, creative approach of like a whimsical, like, oh, the question, like, that kind of the stable question of if you could have dinner, with, or if you could be lost out at sea with three people, who would it be? That's kind of where my mindset went with that question, because I always kind of think whimsically, and kind of always think about people that not only inspire me, but also people that, I might not have a direct connection to, that I kind of visualize or see from an outwardly experience or outwardly position, that would be really cool to have a connection with. And so if I want to answer that question from that perspective, I think it ties in with the same people that I would bring with me on like an expedition or be lost out at sea with. And if we could go current, if you're gonna go current people, people may not know this, I'm a big Rock fan. Okay, Dwayne The Rock Johnson. All right.
Yeah.
I like, you can't say anything negative about this man. I absolutely love Dwayne The Rock Johnson for so many different reasons. His business acumen, but it's also philosophical perspective on life, and just navigating things and going after what you're passionate about. It really just ties in with a lot of different beliefs. And I could sit and have a conversation with him for days. I love Neil deGrasse Tyson as well too. His kind of philosophical stance and belief. I believe we could have really interesting, layered, dynamic conversations in a lot of different spaces. Barack Obama has always been a big inspiration for me, just his journey, not even necessarily his politics, but just kind of the journey, the life journey, kind of shared experiences, and just kind of that holistic thinking of being able to shape so many different things that control the globe in a unique way. And then on the music side, I'm a big Nas fan. And I love his mindset and his kind of lyrical narrative of how he dives deeper into things that affect our community, and how they can be transcendent when it comes to the worlds of entertainment and life, and in different positions and different, political issues and problems and narratives that kind of shape our community. And so those are just some figures that come to mind that not only would be great people to be lost in sea with and have a great discussion, but my board of directors would be people that I'd want to be stuck in a room with and can sit and have really deep philosophical conversations with. And so I think those people would tie into that narrative as well too.
I love that. Yes, that's great. Yeah, as you were speaking, so if I thought about being stuck at sea, though, my mind goes to like survival. So I'm like, I want a Navy SEAL.
Yeah.
Like they're gonna know what to do, But the dinner question, one of the things I actually wrote down on my bucket list is to have dinner with Morgan Freeman and Denzel Washington at the same time.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. Denzel's pretty high on my list as well too. So yes, absolutely. Yeah. That's a great one. That'd be a fantastic conversation.
In case anyone's listening, Maynard and I would love to have dinner with Denzel Washington and Morgan Freeman together. We'll sponsor it. We'll take them wherever they want to go. But that would be fantastic.
Yeah. Speaking to existence.
We'll report back on this manifestation because, it'll happen. You just don't know.
We'll throw Will Smith in that mix as well too. We'll Will Smith in that mix too. That'd be a great one.
We can bring Jada in also. Okay. Amazing. And Beyonce. Let's just get the female.
Yeah. The list goes on and on. Like we can be
All right. We've got those four. So now those, Jada and Beyonce's agents too, in case you're like on the ether listening, or the FBI is tapping us, this is now recorded and you know who to find. Amazing. Okay. So my final question, it's a self-reflection question, and it's designed to be, an alien has landed on Earth and you are the first human that they meet, Maynard. So they're like, hey, I've met Maynard. He's a human. What do they now know about humanity because they've met you? How do you represent us?
Yeah. I want to say that they're going to know that humanity is resilient, because I think that's one thing outside of, obviously, we talk about curiosity being a superpower, and going after what you're passionate about doing. There's an element, and we talk about this a lot in just kind of my entrepreneurial pursuits and different things that I've been able to do with not only my platform, but in so many different areas in life, has all come down to me being resilient. And resiliency is more than just like having thick skin. Resiliency is about being okay with failing and getting back on your feet and trying again, right? All these different elements that we've already talked about, today, all fundamentally come from being resilient, having a resilient mindset, a never give up mindset, a mindset that anything is possible and that new doors are always going to open up. And regardless of whatever obstacles are around you, that you're going to manifest your truth and manifest the things that you desire into existence. I think that all falls under the umbrella of resiliency, because, life for me has thrown me so many different obstacles and redirected me in so many different positions. And I've been able to do a lot of the things that I do now and stay motivated into the work that I do now because I've been resilient. I've faced those obstacles head on. And if an alien came down here and wanted to know what Earth is about, I think I want them to know that us as humanity, when it comes to all the different things that we want to do in life and the different places that we want to go, it comes from us being resilient and knowing that we are going to be successful no matter what, knowing that we're going to speak things into existence and that we're going to overcome different obstacles that we have in life, and we're never going to be deterred. And so I think about resilience when I think about all these other aspects that are really important to communicate, especially for the next generation, because you need to have a resilient mindset as a youth in order to be able to face the turmoil and the obstacles and the limitations that people are going to set upon you. And if we have that mindset instilled in us at a very early age, that resiliency is going to stick with us as we continue to grow.
I love that. Yes. And it's true. We are very, very resilient. Just look at any young child trying to, grow up. They bounce back from every little setback, when they're learning to walk, everything. It's a beautiful way to end today's live. Thank you so much for coming on the show with me today. Where can
Yeah.
people find you if they'd like to learn a little bit more or to connect?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on all platforms at Hip Hop Science Show. I'm really active on Instagram, TikTok, all those good platforms. My website as well too, hiphopscienceshow.com. You can find out about a lot of the work that I do as a keynote speaker, my creative content, a lot of different unique partnerships and explorations. If you sign up for my newsletter, I do, monthly kind of updates on different things that are happening. And so, yeah, those are the easiest platforms you can keep up to me. I love connecting with others. I love being able to share resources, especially for educators and for youth. And so if anybody is out there that's an educator or works with youth or a parent that's looking for opportunities in STEM or provide resources for the students, I share a lot of that on my platform as well too. But all with the goal of sparking curiosity and excitement in STEM and being able to showcase that anything is possible and there's science in everything. So at Hip Hop Science Show on pretty much all the platforms where you can find me.
Amazing. Well, I'll definitely be signing up to your newsletter so I can see what happens with the turtles on your upcoming trip.
Yes.
And I look forward to seeing you. I'm sure I'm going to see you soon here at some of the events coming up that we have where our paths start to
Mhm.
cross.
Yeah.
And we'll talk offline about Sweden. Let's talk about
Yes.
Sweden.
Yes, absolutely. Survival training in full mode. We're gonna make that happen.
Yes, amazing. I love it. All right. Well, thank you, Maynard. Have a wonderful afternoon. And thank you, everyone who's been tuning in with us today live. Next week, we're going to take a break as I'll be traveling for a work conference. And then we'll be back with you with our next episode. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.